Before warning labels, before the FDA, before the Surgeon General says smoking kills, before doctors linked smoking to cancer, an English king looked at tobacco and basically said, "What is wrong with all of you?" Because by the early 1600s, England had become obsessed with smoking, and all the smoke was everywhere. And one man absolutely despised it. Not a priest, not a scientist, the king himself. King James I, the same king behind the King James Version, the same king whose empire would help build England's future in America, and the same man who wrote one of history's first anti smoking attacks. He called tobacco hateful to the nose, harmful to the brain. Then he tried to stop people from smoking with a tax increase so massive it would be the equivalent of a government trying to price cigarettes into extinction. A 4,000% tax hike. It failed. People kept smoking because the addiction had already taken hold. And in one of history's greatest ironies, the very crop King James hated would soon help build the English Empire itself. This is not just a story about tobacco. It's a story about addiction, power, money, colonization, and the king who tried to stop a habit that would outlive him by centuries. This was an age of chaos. Religious wars, public executions, witch hunts, iconoclasm, empires rising and collapsing. Churches were stripped apart, sacred images smashed. Europe itself seemed to be changing shape. And in the middle of all of it, a strange new habit from the Americas. Nicotiana tabacum. Tobacco. It belongs to the Solanaceae, the nightshade family, making it a distant cousin to tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant. At first, Europeans thought it was miraculous, elegant, sophisticated. Men smoked in taverns, universities, ships, and royal courts. Smoke drifted through England so heavily that one man became utterly disgusted by what he saw happening to his kingdom. To understand King James, you have to understand the world he inherited. Europe in the late 1500s and early 1600s was in upheaval. Religious conflict tore kingdoms apart. Protestants and Catholics battled over power, faith, and authority. Across England and parts of Europe, iconoclasm swept through churches and religious images, statues, stained glass, and sacred artwork were smashed and destroyed. The old religious world was collapsing, bishops were losing power, and entirely new ideas were reshaping society. And standing in the middle of that storm was the son of one of history's most tragic figures, Mary, Queen of Scots, her son, King James. James was deeply intellectual. He loved writing, theology, politics, and the idea of monarchy itself. He strongly believed in the divine right of kings, the idea that rulers governed by the will of God. His legacy would become enormous. The King James Version, the creation of the Union Jack, the early colonization of North America. And strangely enough, the expansion of tobacco culture in England despite personally despising the plant himself. He inherited a kingdom trying desperately to hold itself together during an age of instability and change. Before Europeans arrived in the Americas, indigenous peoples had used tobacco for centuries, ceremonially, medicinally, spiritually. But after the voyages of Christopher Columbus, Europeans encountered tobacco and became fascinated by it. The habit spread across Europe like wildfire. By the late 1500s, smoking had become fashionable, exotic, modern. Pipes appeared everywhere. Men stood in clouds of smoke discussing politics, religion, business, and war. Some even believed tobacco cured illness. Europe didn't treat tobacco like poison. They treated it almost like magic. All the smoke was everywhere, and King James hated it. He declared war. In 1604, King James published one of history's earliest anti-smoking attacks, a counterblast to tobacco. And this was no calm academic essay. It was a furious royal rant against smoke itself. When you read it today, it feels shockingly modern and strangely personal. James did not sound detached or scholarly. He sounded irritated, disgusted, almost offended that society had embraced something he viewed as degrading. He famously described smoking as a custom loathsome to the eye, hateful to the nose, harmful to the brain. To him, there was no sophistication, it was filthy. Imagine the scene. A crowded London tavern in the early 1600s. Smoke drifted heavily through the room as pipes glowed in the dim candlelight. Men drank, argued politics, debated religion, laughed loudly, coughed into the thick air, and spat across worn wooden floors while ash from clay pipes scattered across the tables below. The smoke was everywhere, and to King James, England looked ridiculous. But James went further than criticizing the smell. He believed tobacco corrupted something natural, something God-given. He wrote, "The sweetness of man's breath, being a good gift of God, should be willfully corrupted by this stinking smoke?" There was no elevation in smoking. It degraded them. Nature had given human beings clean breath, and tobacco replaced it with what he called an incurable stink. Remember, this is 1604. There's no nicotine science. There's no cancer studies. Yet somehow, James already sensed something dangerous in the habit, not only physically, but socially and morally. One of the most remarkable parts of the Counterblast is when he describes smoking affecting marriages and households. He complains that husbands forced wives to live surrounded by smoke, writing, "The husband shall not be ashamed to reduce thereby his delicate, wholesome, and clean complexioned wife, that either she must also corrupt her sweet breath therewith, or else resolve to live in a perpetual stinking torment." 400 years before debates over secondhand smoke, King James is already complaining about people being forced to breathe it. Behind the old spelling and royal language, you can hear something surprisingly recognizable. A man watching an addictive habit spread through society and wondering why nobody seemed alarmed by it. He didn't stop at words. He genuinely tried to reduce tobacco use in England. In the same year he published the Counterblast, he imposed an enormous tax increase on tobacco imports, raising duties by roughly 4,000%, the kind of tax designed to shock people into quitting. But something surprising happened. The demand barely disappeared. Even with soaring prices, English smokers kept buying what James called the noxious weed. They craved it. It was in deeply the English culture. Then history twisted again. At first, England imported much of its tobacco from Spanish-controlled regions, but by the 1620s, English colonies like Virginia and Maryland began growing and exporting tobacco in massive quantities. Suddenly, tobacco was no longer just a habit. It was becoming the economic engine of England's colonial future. King James faced a difficult reality. He could not stop it. So accepting the inevitable, the crown decided it might as well profit from the addiction it condemned. The English state increasingly took control of the tobacco trade, regulating and taxing the industry heavily. And one of history's greatest ironies, the very crop King James despised, would help lay the financial foundation for the success of England's American colonies. The king who declared war on tobacco ended up ruling over an empire increasingly built on it. That contradiction would reverberate through centuries. Governments warning against smoking while also benefiting financially from its sale. The more things change, the more history rhymes. Today, anti-smoking campaigns are everywhere. Warning labels, commercials, public health campaigns, vaping debates, scientific studies. And yet tobacco remains one of the most addictive and widespread products on earth. 4 centuries later, all the smoke is everywhere. And maybe that's what makes a counterblast to tobacco so fascinating. Not because King James solved the problem, he didn't. Not because he fully understood tobacco, he couldn't. But because centuries before modern science confirmed the dangers, someone already sensed the cost through observation, through culture, through behavior, and through what he saw happening all around him. Today, warning labels sit quietly on cigarette packs, a legal, required part of the marketing. Most people barely notice them anymore. But in 1604, One king looked at a growing smoking culture and sounded an alarm loud enough to echo across centuries. Long before public health campaigns, before modern medicine, before government warning labels, there was a king with a pen declaring war on smoke. And 400 years later, the smoke still lingers. If you enjoy forgotten stories from history, the strange, the dramatic, and the surprisingly modern, subscribe to the House of Mistofer Christopher.